In this video, I describe a side trip to the Hamlet of Aklavik, Northwest Territories. Aklavik sits on the west side of the Mckenzie Delta. The hamlet is located about 185 kilometers, or 115 miles, north of the Arctic Circle, and about 63 kilometers, or 40 miles, west-southwest of Inuvik. Aklavik is situated in the middle of some amazing landscapes. To the west are the Richardson Mountains, and to the east lies the Mackenzie Delta. You might wonder, why visit Aklavik? Well, there are several reasons. Not many tourists visit Aklavik. It's off the beaten track, and that alone is a good reason to visit. Secondly, Aklavik is home to the barren-land grizzly, so there is always a chance to see a grizzly bear, and that's exciting. Thirdly, we wanted to see firsthand what the Mackenzie Delta looked like. And finally, we wanted to see what the Hamlet of Aklavik looked like. Join us as we share a little about our boat trip from Inuvik to Aklavik across the Mackenzie Delta and have a look around the Hamlet of Aklavik, Northwest Territories. First, here is a little context about the Hamlet of Aklavik. Aklavik is a multi-ethnic town home to Inuvialuit, Métis, Gwich'in, and non-Aboriginal people. Aklavik sits within a low-lying maze of channels and islands that makes up the Mackenzie Delta. Until 1961, Aklavik served as the transportation, commercial, and regional administrative center of the Western Arctic. However, because Aklavik was prone to flooding along the Mackenzie River, it was deemed to be an unsuitable place to be a regional center. That decision resulted in the development of Inuvik some 63 kilometers to the east. However, many residents chose to remain in Aklavik, and in 2016, the population was about 600, down from 1,500 at the peak. Okay, so what does the Hamlet of Aklavik look like? This is Moose Kerr School. It was built in 1969 and is named after Arnold J. Moose Kerr, who was a long-standing principal. In addition to standard classrooms, Moose Kerr School includes a home economics room, computer lab, science labs, a shop, and a gymnasium. The school was renovated in 1997 with the expansion of the senior high wing and the addition of a library that reflects the local cultures. The Aklavik Community Learning Center is a location of adult and other types of education. It has facilities to host a range of meetings. This is Aklavik's new home for elders. It was officially opened in 2015 and is called the Joe Greenland Center. Interestingly, the building was built at the same location as the original building because the community wanted its elders to still have the great view of the Mackenzie River, a nice touch to take into account the needs and wishes of the elders. You probably noticed that the Elder Center is built on stilts or piles. That special engineering helps to keep heat from passing through the floor into the ground. If the ground warms, the patchy permafrost that lies beneath the building would surely melt, and that would be a disaster for the building and the community. There are several interesting homes in Aklavik. This one seems to mark the residence of a successful hunter. Note the large plastic container outside the house. This may be a fuel tank based on the vent located on the left side, but I am uncertain. The fuel would be used to heat the house during the winter. Because the tank is not insulated, I doubt that it is a water tank. Like almost every remote northern community, electricity is generated locally using diesel generators. These fuel storage tanks hold fuel needed to run those generators. In Aklavik, most of the fuel is driven in over the frozen Mackenzie Delta during the winter using the winter road. Because Aklavik is located on a river channel, the community is also able to bring in smaller amounts of fuel using a barge during the summer if necessary. You may have heard the story about Albert Johnson, also known as the Mad Trapper of Rat River. His remains are buried in the Aklavik Cemetery. I will spare you the details of the Mad Trapper, but his story is a legendary Canadian mystery which captivated North America. Albert Johnson led the Royal Canadian Mounted Police on a 7-week manhunt in the Canadian wilderness as he fled across the frozen tundra and mountains in a winter blizzard. The story began in 1931 when members of Aklavik's detachment of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police went to question Albert Johnson about a trapping dispute. An RCMP constable was wounded. Now Albert Johnson was in trouble. He now faced an attempted murder charge. The RCMP returned to Aklavik to get reinforcements. At that time, Albert Johnson fled into the winter wilderness, but the RCMP continued their search for Albert Johnson. Live daily radio reports captivated listeners across North America as the RCMP continued their manhunt. The RCMP, with the help of the famous bush pilot Wap May, found Albert Johnson in February of 1932, and after a brief gunfight, Albert Johnson was killed as he tried to escape. The remains of Albert Johnson are buried in Aklavik. Interestingly, the true identity of the mad trapper, who called himself Albert Johnson, remains a mystery to this day. So, what does the Mackenzie Delta look like? The Mackenzie Delta is Canada's largest freshwater delta. It sits between the Richardson Mountains to the west, Inuvik and the tundra to the east. The delta was created by deposition of lots of suspended sediment carried by the great Mackenzie River as it flows to the Arctic Ocean. The Mackenzie River flows northward from Great Slave Lake into the Beaufort Sea of the Arctic Ocean. The Mackenzie River Basin is the largest basin in Canada, with an area of about 1,800,000 square kilometers. The entire Mackenzie River system is 4,240 kilometers long, making it the second longest river in North America. The river is named after the European explorer Alexander Mckenzie. If you have the opportunity to drive to Yellowknife, also in the Northwest Territories, you come close to the headwaters of the Mackenzie River as you cross the Mackenzie River near the town of Fort Providence. This video shows that bridge crossing over the Mackenzie River. Great Slave Lake is about 60 kilometers, or 35 miles away to the right. The river crossing used to be by ferry, but the new bridge removes the challenges associated with ice bridges in the spring and fall. Now, back to the Mackenzie River Delta. Officially, the Mackenzie River Delta begins at point separation. About 540,000 cubic feet per second of water flow past point separation during the peak summer flow of the Mackenzie River. That's equivalent to about 6 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water flowing by each second. The delta covers an area of about 12,175 square kilometers, or about 4,700 square miles. That is about twice the size of Canada's Prince Edward Island, which has an area of 5,660 square kilometers, and it is 4 times the size of the U.S. state of Rhode Island and bigger than the country of Jamaica. The Mackenzie River Delta is a maze of branching, entangled channels, numerous ponds, and cut-off lakes, also known as oxbow lakes. All of that makes the delta a fabulous habitat for migratory birds and water-loving animals. The delta is home to a large population of mink and muskrat. In fact, by the 1930s, Aklavik was one of the most important fur trade centers in Canada. Between 1920 and 1960, muskrat trapping was the main source of income for the Inuvik people who live in the delta area. Aklavik was once considered to be the muskrat fur capital of the world. In the summer, the Mackenzie River Delta also provides habitat for migrating snow geese, tundra swans, and brant, and is a breeding habitat for various other waterfowl. The delta itself is also a birthing area for beluga whales. It is indeed a very special place. Interestingly, the Mackenzie River and its delta are an important source of driftwood. A lot of that driftwood is deposited on the beaches of the Western Arctic or is pulled from the Mackenzie River, as seen in this photo. That driftwood gives the Inuvik people easier access to wood compared to most other Canadian Inuit people. The recovered wood is used by the people of Aklavik to make boats, tools, houses, and even sleds. You really do appreciate the maze of channels separated by islands within the Mackenzie Delta when you cross the delta by boat. We were told by our boat guide that it is easy to get lost in the delta if you're not familiar with the many channels and passages. So, small directional signs have been erected to direct the less experienced people through the maze of channels between Aklavik and Inuvik. Of course, our guide, Jimmy Kalinnik, did not need to use those signs. One highlight of the delta crossing was a stop to look at melting soil ice. In places, the Mackenzie River has eroded and undercut the edge of islands. Where that undercut land has fallen into the river, silty soil, frozen during the winter, is now exposed. The red arrow points to a layer of frozen soil that is melting where exposed to the sun. The soil ice is not likely to be permafrost. Rather, the fact that the tree roots penetrate the thin layer of ice suggests this is seasonally frozen ground. Also, soil ice maps of the region show that permafrost is rare within the Mackenzie River Delta, presumably because the local climate is strongly influenced by the presence of the river. However, it is nevertheless dramatic to see the seasonally melting ice. It's a dramatic illustration of how quickly frozen ground melts if the insulating cover is broken and exposed. And this is exactly what is happening across the Arctic, where permafrost is indeed melting. Perhaps the most exciting sighting while crossing the Mackenzie River Delta was a grizzly bear. Well, actually, two bear. We saw a sow or mother bear and her juvenile bear on the mudflat. They were eating fresh sedges. Once they saw us in the boat, they each took off into the bush in opposite directions. Grizzly bears are the second largest carnivore in Canada after the polar bear, so I confess it is the one animal that we carefully watch for when we are hiking in the alpine or on the tundra. And yes, we always carry bear spray. This year I bought 4 cans of bear spray, because you can never have too much bear spray when you're in bear country. As an aside, although it may look like we are close to the bears, I did use a telephoto lens, so we did not unduly stress the bears by our presence. And that is a brief visit to the Hamlet of Aklavik and the Mackenzie River Delta in Northwest Territories. They are both amazing places to visit, so if you are ever in Inuvik during the summer, take a day and travel across the delta by boat to see the Hamlet of Aklavik and to see firsthand the wonders of the Mackenzie River Delta. If this is your first visit, please subscribe. Don't forget to click the bell to receive future updates. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Until next time, please stay safe. Bye-bye.